Raja, how are you?
Hey, Joan, how are you doing?
So far, so good. Really good. I remember I've been watching this case as it's worked its way in front of the Supreme Court. And, today they're hearing arguments. I mean, I know that Donald Trump believes that he has politically manipulated the court. But do you think the Affordable Care Act will be struck down because of partisan politics, or do you think it has a shot?
I actually think it has a shot, Joan. So the plaintiffs in this case basically comprise Texas and about 18 other states, along with the Trump administration. They had to make at least two arguments that are very weak. One is that they actually had standing to sue, meaning they suffered an injury related to the Affordable Care Act that would allow them to sue to render it unconstitutional. The second argument is that even if one provision were unconstitutional, the whole law has to go down. And both of those potential arguments and those actual arguments are flawed on their face. And the very interesting thing is that two conservative justices today, namely Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Roberts, actually found the defenders of the law more persuasive in rebutting those two arguments than we had thought before. So I do give the ACA a shot at surviving this, but I do have some comments about why it's all the more important for us to win in Georgia and get a Senate majority.
Go for
it. Well, look, we can't put anything past these conservative justices. They may very well render the law unconstitutional, which would be devastating. 21 million people are on the Affordable Care Act. Hundreds of millions of people rely on its protections, including its protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So if for some reason they handed down a ruling, which, again, I think would be deeply flawed, but it could happen, then Congress would have to act immediately along with the Biden administration to basically correct the situation, so to speak, and that would necessarily mean we need a majority in the Senate. And that's why the Georgia runoffs are so important right now, because they are the difference between us being in the minority yet again in the Senate at Mitch McConnell's whim or taking the majority. And we have to have the majority for various reasons, including this one related to the ACA.
You said earlier that there were indications that Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh seemed to think that the defenders of the ACA had made some strong arguments. Is that, I mean, obviously they're not going to tip their hand on how they're going to rule on this, but are you making that judgment, on the basis of the way they questioned those people or some of the things that they said to those lawyers? I'm always curious when people say, oh, well, they heard arguments and the court seems to be leaning this way. Why do you feel that Kavanaugh and Roberts were leaning to maybe support the ACA? What was it that they said or did that made you think that?
It's a great question, and I have now read several summaries of what transpired in the arguments, and I was paying close attention to what they actually said in their questions. And what Kavanaugh and Roberts really keyed in on was the argument related to severability. It's the idea, Joan, and perhaps your listeners already know this, but it's the idea that if one part of a law, in this case the Affordable Care Act, is somehow deemed unconstitutional, that the rest of it should be allowed to stand. And what's very interesting here is that both Kavanaugh and Roberts pointed out that in 2017, when the Republican Congress, under Donald Trump's leadership, passed that horrible tax law, which we've talked about before on your program, reducing the penalty for the healthcare mandate to $0.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, they did not also try to repeal the entire act. In other words, they intended for the act to stand to be severable, if you will, from the mandate, which, as you know, they are arguing to be unconstitutional. And therefore, in their actions, forget their words, but their actions, they showed their intentions, and that carries the day, especially with conservative justices such as Kavanaugh and Roberts.
Well, it's going to be interesting. My understanding is that it's going to be many months before there is an official ruling. But I just, I understand that they at least make the go through the motions of making their rulings just based on what they think about the law. But 20 million people are just going to be devastated if this gets struck down.
Right.
But then I guess that just means that, you and Joe Biden and this democratically controlled Senate we get when we win in Georgia are going to have to write some new laws then, and write them fast.
That's exactly right, Joan. There's a legal process which is underway, as you know, and then there's a political process. And if anybody didn't understand the stakes of why we need to win back Georgia, we need to win back a majority, now they should understand that, because we need to be able to correct whatever needs to be corrected in the ACA to kind of save it from yet another constitutional challenge. Again, I think these are bogus challenges, by the way, but I'm just saying we have to do whatever we need to do to protect the ACA legislatively. And then secondly, we need to appoint the right judges to the courts to be handling these different disputes. We cannot pick ideologues the way that Donald Trump picked ideologues. We need to pick people who are good jurists, who know what the law is and are willing to apply it impartially and fairly to everybody in every instance. And so that's why, again, I come back to those Georgia runoffs. It's very timely, this case. It's in reminding people why, hey, make some phone calls, donate a couple dollars, do whatever you can to help with getting a Senator Warnock and a Senator Ossoff into the 117th Congress.
And let's hope it happens. Raja, thank you so much. I know how busy you are. Thanks for taking the time to explain all this to us. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.